My videos on the Kalergi Plan conspiracy theory and tangentially, I guess, about the Great Replacement and white genocide nonsense continue to get a bunch of hits and a lot of vitriol in the comments from, well, frankly, retarded white supremacists and arch nationalists. Given the primacy of the small boats scandal here in the UK, I thought it might be apposite to do a little quick overview of the actual state of immigration issues in the UK. So these are the stats for 2022 to 2023. We don't have the 2023 stats yet, but you can look all of this stuff and confirm it for yourself if you feel so inclined. I'm not going to handhold you because nobody bothers anyway, and if you do bother, you're more likely to believe what you find for yourself than what I point you at. So, the current UK population is around 67.33 million people. Of that number, about 10.38 million residents are not born in the UK. But that's not really the accurate figure because there's a whole bunch of other stuff involved, things that count, things that don't, and so on. So if you want to look at it as a percentage overall from the net statistics, it's about 14.8% of the UK population isn't native, isn't born here. That's only risen from about 9% in 2004. So in 20 years, it's gone from 9% of the population to nearly 15% of the population. And then, only because of unprecedented circumstances. Of late, it has been falling again. Brexit's part of the reason for that. There are other reasons as well. And it's likely that once a whole bunch of Ukrainian refugees and others start returning home after peace hopefully comes, the amount of immigration will go into negative territory quite soon. So, of that 14.8%, 3.5 million of that number are from the European Union, but many of these are leaving as a result of Brexit. So that and the aforementioned may lead to a negative net migration in another year or two. About 6.8 million are non-EU migrants. Now, I would remind you that that includes the Ukrainian refugees who have boosted recent numbers. Also, there's been quite a bit of immigration from Hong Kong and Nepal. Remember when we were all fighting for the Gurkhas to be allowed in, and we should have allowed a lot more people from Hong Kong to come in at the time, but not a lot we can do about it now. Of those who immigrate to the UK, roughly half later leave. The largest number of immigrants come here for education, and so obviously once they finish their education, the vast and overwhelming majority of those then leave and go back home. The second largest number of immigrants come to the UK for work, much of which is transitory or seasonal, so they come over for the work in season, then they go home. The next largest amount is for humanitarian reasons, then asylum seekers, then the people who immigrate to join their families here, and then the catch-all other. Now, there seems to me to be some crossover between what counts as humanitarian immigration and asylum seeking. I'm not sure how they're determining which is which. Asylum generally has to be something you apply for, refugee status not so much, so maybe that's the difference. In the news, there's been wall-to-wall coverage of the small boat crossings, so-called. In 2022, about 45,000 people came over in said small boat crossings. That's about 3.75% of the total amount of immigration, or to put it in simpler terms, fuck all. Why are quote-unquote so many people coming over in small boats? Because there are no remaining legal routes into the country for asylum seekers. There's also been a kind of organised, or disorganised if you prefer, lack of effort in processing applications for asylum, which means people get stuck in the system for very long amounts of time, taking money out of the system, not being able to work, not being able to pay back in, and not being determined whether they have a right to stay or not. The situation's become so bad that it would have been cheaper to send these asylum seekers on a Disney cruise for a year rather than to house them in this prison barge boondoggle. It's about 12 million quid rather than 18 million quid. The whole thing with the small boats is a distraction from class issues. And frankly, if you're working class or underclass in the UK, you have a lot more in common with immigrants and asylum seekers than you do with the people telling you to hate the immigrants and asylum seekers. Nationalism is a distraction from class issues. For more perspective, there are about 1 million empty job vacancies here in the UK. Many of those are for low-paid, transitory work, such as that in agriculture and so on, but there's also about 124,000 vacancies in the healthcare system, about 9,000 of which are for doctors. So we need immigration. In fact, we need it at about double the current rate in order to fill all of these vacancies. Food is rotting in the fields otherwise. The NHS is massively overstretched otherwise, especially since we've lost access to all those EU migrants that used to come here to work very easily. Every general practitioner doctor is responsible for about 2,000 people. So you can see that each immigrant doctor or healthcare worker that comes to the UK helps alleviate strain on the NHS rather than adding to it, provided we get at least 2 doctors or healthcare workers with every 2,000 or so people that come to the country. That doesn't seem too much of a stretch. Of people who do immigrate to the country, do they cost us? Well, no. People who come from the EU or similar developed nations pay in about 30 to 60% more than they take out from the public purse. Non-EU immigrants pay in a bit less. They pay in about 3 to 10% more than they take out of the public purse. But the point is that the more immigrants we have in the country and working and contributing to economic activity, the better off we are, not the worse off we are. Do they outbreed us? This seems to be a concern for a lot of nationalists and white supremacists. It used to be a concern in the US about Chinese immigrants. It used to be a concern in the US about Irish immigrants. It used to be a concern in the US about Italian immigrants. The Protestant majority in the US was concerned that Catholics would rapidly outbreed them. Did it happen? No. Has this kind of thing ever happened? No. In the UK, the fertility rate for UK-born women, that would include second and third generation immigrant women, by the way, is about 1.5, so it's a little bit more, so below replacement levels. For first generation immigrant women, it's about 2.0, so only roughly replacement rate. So their population is going to be staying about the same. But again, I would remind you that the children that they have are then UK born, and once you get to the second or third generation of immigrants, their birth rate normalises to the same overall rate as the rest of the country. So no, nobody's going to be outbreeding us. Is our culture under threat? Well, culture is mimetic, not genetic. So no, there is no reason why people of a different colour should not buy into many aspects of British culture, as well as the culture of their original ethnicity, or country. One need only look to see how West Indians have integrated incredibly well, or South Asians have integrated incredibly well, until they have become woven into the very fabric of our society as a whole, taking on board many British characteristics, if such a thing can be said to exist. There's no reason to think our culture will be diluted or destroyed by people. Indeed, it is enriched and expanded. There's nothing to worry about there. Memes don't pass genetically, they pass culturally. We live in a joined up world now, and neither globalism nor internationalism really has a great deal to do with it. We communicate across borders around the world. The white supremacists make fun of me for saying that, people fall in love across borders, but it does happen. It may not be the main driver of immigration, but it is illustrative of the point. We are aware of ourselves much more as human beings, as global citizens, of opportunities in other countries, of people in other countries. We are often more loyal to our tribe scattered around the globe than we are to our nation, to our ethnicity, or other meaningless categories we get shoved in just by virtue of being born. But here in the UK, we also have our imperial legacy. We went out into the world and we settled all these countries, and we left the stamp of British culture on many of those countries to one degree or another, and the language English. So little wonder that people want to move somewhere where they'll be understood, where they can communicate, where they have family ties, where they have historical ties. More recently, of course, we've been the tag-along in so many of America's wars around the world. It's hardly surprising that people who allied with us and then hung out to dry might want to make their way to the UK or the US, figuring that perhaps we owe them, and we do owe them. We owe them a duty of care. Internationally, post-World War II, the UK helped create a more humane and open world. Many of these rules about refugees and asylum seeking are rules that we created or forced for. We showed the best of ourselves in this situation. This more recent collapse into xenophobia, racism, petty nationalism, Brexiteering, it isn't patriotic. It isn't who we are here in the UK at our best. It isn't the kind of nation that people want to live in, whether that be people native to the country or immigrants who are coming here. This whole concern that these nationalists and white supremacists have is absurd. We're under no threat of being flooded out of our own culture or our own country. There is no plan, there is no scheme, there are market forces and human tendencies at work. That's all. The ebb and flow of international affairs and economics. There's no reason to even remotely suspect that there's any kind of sinister plan at work. And if there even was, it would be being run so utterly incompetently, it would be completely at the mercy of other forces beyond its control. We have nothing to worry about, and we have everything to gain. Culturally, economically, every which way you can think of. The whole worry is just nonsensical and cherry-picking the rotten cherries. Zang. Welcome to St. Cloud is a system-agnostic setting of atmospheric surreal horror and investigation by Miguel Ribeiro. An isolated town set amongst forests and mountains, St. Cloud is a closed community of eccentrics and oddities. While system-agnostic, guideline statistics are provided for actual fucking monsters. You can get Welcome to St. Cloud at post-mort.com, lulu.com, and drive-thru RPG.